She left without warning. No argument, no goodbye, just a folded note on the kitchen counter. 7 words that shattered his world. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. For Thomas Granger, a man who had always believed in loyalty and family, that morning felt like a punch to the soul. His wife, Rebecca, vanished overnight, leaving behind not just a husband but 5 children, including a toddler still in diapers and a kindergartner who cried when her socks didn't match. That day, the house fell into a haunting silence. The children asked questions Thomas couldn't answer. Where's Mom? Did we do something wrong? He lied gently, told them she needed time, that she still loved them and that maybe she'd be back. But she never returned. In the weeks that followed, Thomas quit one of his 2 jobs just to keep things afloat. He burned dinners. He missed permission slips. He barely slept. But every morning at 5 a.m., he'd pour himself a cup of coffee in the same chipped mug Rebecca once loved, not to remember her, but to remind himself that he wouldn't let their world fall apart. Because even when everything inside him was breaking, he chose to stay. And that choice, quiet, exhausted, and unseen, was the beginning of a family rebuilt from the ashes. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't polished. But somehow they survived. Each morning, Thomas woke up before sunrise. The house was still, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. At 5 a.m. he'd reach for that old mug, the one with the faded green rim, and pour his coffee. He rarely finished it. By 6:30 the kitchen turned into chaos. Cereal spilled, someone lost a shoe, little Ellie cried over a missing hair clip. But the sound of their laughter, however brief, was his anchor. On the construction site, Thomas found a strange kind of peace. The sound of metal tools, concrete mixers, and barked orders helped drown out the noise in his head. His supervisor, Ron, used to shake his head and laugh. 5 kids, man. And you're still standing. Thomas would just grin and shrug. What else could he do? What no one saw were the moments behind the wheel of his dusty pickup truck during lunch breaks, when Thomas would close his eyes, let the exhaustion wash over him, and quietly cry where no one could see. His oldest son, Logan, stepped up faster than any child should. At barely 12, he was packing school lunches, chasing his younger siblings around the living room, and flipping grilled cheese sandwiches with the precision of a short-order cook. Thomas never asked him to, but Logan did it anyway, and never once complained. Still, Thomas noticed the quiet looks, the unspoken exhaustion in his son's eyes. Sometimes he caught Logan staring blankly at the ceiling at night, too tired to sleep, too grown for his years. There were nights when Thomas wasn't sure he could keep going. When the bills piled up, when the fridge was nearly empty, when he'd sit alone at school conferences and pretend he wasn't hurting. But then Ellie would throw her arms around his neck, whisper, "I love you, Daddy." And suddenly, he had enough strength for one more day. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And in a world that felt like it had turned its back on them, that was everything. 10 years passed like pages in a weathered book. Some torn, some stained with tears, but never left unread. Thomas never remarried. He barely dated. There simply wasn't time. His life revolved around packed lunches, school drop-offs, bedtime stories, and laundry baskets that never seemed to empty. While other men his age climbed corporate ladders, he built something far more lasting. A home anchored in love and stability. He missed out on a lot. Weddings, old friendships, even job promotions. But what he gained couldn't be measured in milestones or money. It was in the way Ellie clung to him during thunderstorms. The way Logan offered advice to his younger siblings like a seasoned parent. The way Josh, the quiet middle child, started writing short stories about heroes who never gave up. Then, 10 years to the day since Rebecca vanished, life threw another curveball. It was an ordinary Thursday. Thomas had just come home, boots caked in dried mud, when he found it. A single envelope in the pile of mail. No return address, but the handwriting stopped him cold. It was hers. He didn't open it. Not right away. For days, he carried the letter around in the pocket of his flannel jacket. He felt it against his chest with every lift of a beam or scrape of a shovel. The past pressed itself into the present, and he wasn't sure he was ready. And just as the emotional storm built inside him, something unexpected happened. Ron, his longtime foreman, called him into the site trailer. "You've been with us a long time, Tom," Ron said, leaning back in his chair. "And we've noticed. You show up. You work hard. You never complain. We'd like to offer you the lead foreman position. Thomas blinked. It wasn't just a title. It was a lifeline. A chance to send Logan to college, to finally replace their rusted minivan, to put food in the fridge without counting coins. But it came with a cost. Longer hours, weekend shifts, missed dinners. More burden on Logan. Less time being the father he'd fought so hard to be. That night, as the house finally quieted, Thomas sat across from Logan and laid it all on the table. The boy didn't flinch. "We'll make it work, Dad," Logan said softly. "We always have." Later that night, when the house had gone still and even the hum of the refrigerator seemed distant, Thomas finally opened the letter. It began like a confession. Rebecca wrote that she had been overwhelmed back then, that leaving wasn't a calculated decision, but a moment of panic. She spoke of therapy, church, and slowly trying to rebuild her life. She said she had changed. And then came the part that tightened Thomas's grip on the paper. "I want to see the kids. I hope you can forgive me. I hope they can too." Thomas stared at those words, the edges of the letter trembling in his hands. Forgiveness for the birthdays missed, for the school plays with empty seats, for the endless nights when Ellie sobbed and asked, "Why doesn't Mommy love us?" Rebecca wanted a second chance. But in her letter, she never once asked what her absence had cost them. He didn't respond right away. He folded the letter carefully and left it on the kitchen table. Not hidden. Not ignored. Just waiting. Over the next few days the envelope sat there, silent but loud, noticed by every child who passed it. Logan eyed it more than once, his brows furrowed in quiet calculation. Josh finally asked, "Is it important?" Thomas simply nodded. "Yes, but not yet." He knew this couldn't be decided in a moment of fatigue, or when one of the little ones had the flu, or when Logan was buried in schoolwork. This wasn't just a family matter. It was a crossroads. Finally, on Sunday night, after dinner plates were cleared and the kitchen was still, Thomas gathered the courage. He reached for the envelope, looked around at his children and said gently, "Kids, there's something I need to share." Logan straightened in his chair. Ellie froze, spoon in hand. Thomas held up the letter. "It's from your mother." A long silence filled the room. No one breathed. No one blinked. "She says she wants to see you. Says she's changed." And then, without skipping a word, he read the letter aloud, voice steady, hands trembling. Because no matter what happened next, they deserved the truth. All of it. The moment Thomas finished reading the letter, the silence in the room became almost unbearable. Logan's face had gone pale, jaw clenched tightly. "Why now?" he asked, voice low and flat. "Why not 10 years ago when we needed her?" Josh kept his eyes fixed on the table, his fingers tracing imaginary lines on the wood grain. "Is she really coming back?" Ellie didn't speak. She curled up in her chair, shrinking into herself like she wanted to disappear. The two youngest sat wide-eyed, not fully understanding the moment, but sensing the heaviness in the air. Thomas nodded slowly. "She reached out, but nothing is decided. I wanted you to hear it first because this affects all of us." He paused, eyes scanning the table, then added, "No one's going to be forced into anything." Logan broke the quiet again, sharper this time. "We're not a hotel she can just check back into." No one disagreed. That night, Thomas found Logan standing in the hallway, staring at an old photo on the wall, a Christmas snapshot from 5 years ago, all 6 of them in matching red and green pajamas. Rebecca wasn't in it. "She wasn't there," Logan said quietly. "I know," Thomas replied. "I don't even remember the sound of her voice anymore." Thomas didn't answer. He just stood beside his son, shoulder to shoulder, both lost in the same swirl of memory and reality. In the days that followed, the letter lingered in the air like an unsettled storm. Ellie cried at school without knowing why. Josh became restless and withdrawn. Even the two youngest, normally so full of laughter, moved more slowly, their eyes less bright. Thomas began to question everything. Had he protected them for a decade only to reopen old wounds? Would letting Rebecca in undo everything he'd built? One night, as he tucked Ellie into bed, she looked up at him and whispered, "Does Mommy still love us?" Thomas's heart clenched. He stroked her hair and answered as gently as he could, "I think she does, sweetheart. But love isn't always enough." And in that moment he realized this time it wasn't about Rebecca's intentions. It was about their safety, their peace, and their choice. The days that followed were some of the hardest Thomas had faced in years. Not because of bills or broken appliances, but because of the silence. Logan, usually so composed, had gone quiet. Josh was distracted, constantly pacing or fidgeting, asking questions that Thomas had no good answers to. Ellie, who hadn't had nightmares in years, started creeping into Thomas's bed again in the middle of the night, never saying a word, just needing to be close. Even the two youngest seemed unsettled, playing less, laughing less. The whole house felt heavier, like the weight of Rebecca's letter had settled into the very walls. At the job site, Thomas struggled to concentrate. He misread measurements, dropped tools, stared off into space between hammer swings. Eventually, Ron pulled him aside. "You all right, Tom?" After a long pause, Thomas finally said it out loud. "She reached out after 10 years. Said she wants to come back." Ron raised an eyebrow. 10 years? What does she want? "I don't know," Thomas replied honestly. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Ron didn't press. He simply gave a nod and said something Thomas wouldn't forget. "Whatever you do, protect your peace." That night, Thomas sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at Rebecca's letter again. The words hadn't changed, but their weight had grown heavier. Not just for him, but for the children too. The next morning, Thomas made a call. Not to Rebecca, but to a lawyer. After hearing everything, the abandonment, the emotional toll, the sudden reappearance, the lawyer spoke plainly. "You've had sole custody for a decade. She has no legal rights unless the court gives them back. But if she pushes, you need to be ready." That was all Thomas needed to hear. When he returned home, Logan was already one step ahead. "I found her," he said, sliding a phone across the table. Thomas leaned in and saw Rebecca's face on a GoFundMe page, accompanied by captions pleading for help and second chances. "She's not coming back for us," Logan said quietly. "She's coming back because she's drowning." Thomas stared at the screen, jaw tight. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about protection. And he knew in that moment exactly what he had to do next. The next day, Thomas made another call, this time to a private investigator. "I want the truth," he told him firmly. "No speculation, no half answers. Just facts." The investigator nodded. "You'll have it soon." That evening, Thomas was in the kitchen packing school lunches, when Josh approached him with wide, anxious eyes. "Dad, if she wants to take us, can she?" Thomas crouched down to meet his son eye to eye. "No," he said without hesitation. "She left. I didn't. And I'm not going to let anyone undo what we've built." He meant it. Every word. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Thomas walked quietly through the house. He paused in each room, watching Logan study late into the night, seeing Josh curled up under his favorite blanket, Ellie clutching her bear, the two youngest breathing in soft, steady rhythms. He had held this family together through chaos and loss, through uncertainty and exhaustion. And now, as Rebecca sought a way back in, he realized something even deeper. He wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting to protect peace. Then came the call. A Thursday afternoon. Unknown number. Thomas hesitated, then answered. Her voice came softly, uncertainly through the line. "Thomas, it's me." It was the first time he'd heard Rebecca's voice in a decade. "I just want to see them," she said quickly. "Just once. One meeting. Please." There was no apology this time, only desperation. Thomas let her words hang in the air for a long moment. "If they don't want to see you," he finally said, his voice calm but firm, "it ends there. No pressure. No surprises." She hesitated, then quietly agreed. "Okay." Thomas chose the meeting place himself. A public park they all knew, neutral ground, somewhere with room to walk away if it got too hard. When he told the kids, there was no shouting, no outburst. Just long looks, clenched jaws, and quiet agreement. They needed to see for themselves. On the day of the meeting, the sky was gray and the air hung damp with tension. As they stood by the duck pond, shoulder to shoulder, Thomas realized. This wasn't about giving her another chance. This was about giving his children a choice. And no matter what happened next, he'd be right there beside them. When Rebecca finally arrived at the park, She didn't look like the woman who had left 10 years ago. Her coat was too thin for the weather, her eyes sunken and her steps hesitant. Age and hardship had etched themselves into her features. She stopped a few feet away from them, Thomas and the 5 children standing shoulder to shoulder beside the duck pond. The wind stirred fallen leaves at their feet, but no one moved. "I've missed you all," she said, her voice trembling. The children didn't respond. Logan stood with arms crossed, his eyes hard but unreadable. Josh stared at the ground, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. Ellie gripped Thomas's hand tightly, half hiding behind his leg. The youngest two huddled close, unsure but watchful. Rebecca kept talking about being lost, about healing, about how hard life had been. Her voice cracked with emotion. But the words, they bounced off 10 years of absence like rain off a rooftop. Then Logan stepped forward. Not angry, not emotional, just steady. "What do you expect from us now?" he asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was a question from a boy who had grown up too soon. Rebecca had no answer. She blinked, looked down, and didn't speak again. The meeting didn't last much longer. There were no hugs, no tears, just silence, deep, heavy, and final. As they turned to leave, Rebecca whispered behind them, "I hope you'll let me try." No one turned back. The car ride home was quiet. No one asked to stop for ice cream. No one reached for music. Even the 2 youngest, who normally chatted about ducks or clouds or snacks, said nothing. That night, Thomas sat on the edge of his bed, exhausted in body and soul. Logan appeared in the doorway, his expression still tight. "She didn't even ask how we've been," he said flatly. Thomas nodded. "I know." And in that moment it became clear. Whatever Rebecca had hoped to rebuild, this family wasn't the same one she had left behind. They had found strength in the struggle, and this time they wouldn't be broken. In the days after the park meeting, the house fell into a peculiar stillness. Not tension, but something heavier, quieter. No one talked about what had happened. They didn't have to. It clung to the air like a storm that had passed but left behind broken branches. At dinner, Logan scrolled silently on his phone. Josh poked at his food, barely eating. Ellie, usually a fountain of questions, was uncharacteristically quiet. Even the youngest two, often lost in their own little worlds, sensed the shift. "She looked like she needed something," Logan muttered one evening. "Not like someone who came back for love." Thomas didn't argue. 3 days later, the private investigator called. "You might want to sit down," he warned. The truth came quickly. Rebecca was drowning in debt. Maxed out credit cards, eviction notices, pending lawsuits. She hadn't held a job for more than a few months in years. The GoFundMe Logan found? Real. Desperate. But that wasn't all. "She's been using your name," the investigator added. "Talking about your kids online. Even suggesting that reconnecting with them could turn things around for her financially." Thomas leaned back in his chair. His heart didn't race, it simply sank. That evening, he gathered the children around the kitchen table once more. He laid down the investigator's report. No drama, no lectures. "I wanted you to see the truth for yourselves," he said. "No secrets. No pretending." Logan read silently. Josh flipped through the pages, eyes wide. Ellie leaned against Thomas's side, unsure what to make of it. "So she's not coming back because she loves us," Ellie said quietly. "No, sweetheart," Thomas replied gently, wrapping his arm around her. "She came back because she needed something. But we don't owe her anything." A silence followed, long and deep. But this time it wasn't filled with confusion. It was filled with clarity. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were choosing peace, choosing truth, and standing as a family built not by circumstance, but by love, loyalty, and 10 years of unwavering sacrifice. And Thomas knew with absolute certainty, he would protect that with everything he had. Later that night, long after the house had quieted, Thomas unlocked the top drawer of his desk. Inside was a thick envelope, carefully sealed, quietly waiting for the right moment. The next evening, he gathered the kids at the table once more. With steady hands, he laid the envelope down. "I've been saving this," he said, "for when it mattered most." Inside were official papers, documents with stamps and signatures, college funds, emergency accounts, legal safeguards, and something else. "I worked with a lawyer," he said. I legally adopted all 5 of you. For a moment no one spoke. Even the youngest sat still. You are mine, Thomas continued. By law, by heart, and by everything that matters. Logan's eyes welled. You did all that without telling us? Thomas smiled gently. Because love isn't loud. It works quietly to keep you safe, even when you don't see it. That night, in the stillness of their kitchen, the Granger family didn't just find peace. They found something more powerful: certainty. True love doesn't always shout. It doesn't demand credit. It builds, protects, and sacrifices in silence. A real father doesn't just raise children, he builds a future, brick by brick, even when no one's watching. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Have you ever seen quiet love in action? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that remind us what truly matters: family, sacrifice, and unconditional love.